Why is America so afraid of the Russian Mafia? The Mafia? What crazy things the Russians did. The Russians did in the 90s, and what's going on, and how things are in Brighton Beach now. I'll tell you about the rise of the Russian Mafia, the most dangerous, and the bride case that set the world abuzz with its cunning. And at the end, I'll tell you what place in crime the Russians have now, and let me begin. First boss. In order in the middle of the century, when the Soviet Union opened its borders to Jewish immigrants, New York City was the site, the birthplace of something completely new and unprecedented in the entire world of the Russian Mafia. Among the many looking for a better was Yevsey Agron, a Leningradian with a troubled past, and certainly not with a tarnished reputation. His former activities in his homeland spanned a spectrum of crimes, from theft to financial fraud, which gave him a certain status at the time of when he moved to the U.S. This wave of emigration brought many to New York City, primarily because the lack of visa fees made the city a desirable place for new beginnings. Especially popular was South Brooklyn, and Brighton Beach in particular. Quickly became known as Little Odessa because of the large number of immigrants from the Soviet Union. It was there that Agron found fertile ground for the creation of a criminal empire, attracting to himself fellow ex-Soviet inmates. Prisoners, just like him, who were eager for a fresh start. But outside outlaw Agro was able to quickly build a hierarchy of fear and respect that made him and his associates truly elusive to law enforcement. The gang, estimated by the FBI to have 500 members, not only racketeering local businessmen, but also organizing fraud, executing contract murders, and even pimping. The efficiency of their operations was so high that even experienced members of the Italian Mafia Cosa Nostra were impressed by their ruthlessness. However, the most memorable and telling example of their brutality was the case of a woman who decided to testify against a member of the group. She and her child were killed with particular cruelty, wounding parts of them, which served as a gruesome reminder to anyone who might have considered cooperating with the police or the FBI by the late 80s. The Russian Mafia had not only established itself in New York City, but also began cooperating with one of the Italian-American mafia families, the Colombo clan. They worked together, developed complex tax schemes of tax fraud, particularly related to the wholesale gasoline trade. But the appetites of the redistribution are growing, and competition and jealousy are competition and envy only intensified. And the numbers are astronomical, hundreds of millions of dollars. By the way, the author of this scheme was the advisor, Grona's advisor, David Gattin, a retired officer. For a long time, he even managed to hide a massive fraud scheme from his boss. That brought in enormous profits. However, when the truth came to light, Agron, nicknamed Yusei of Leningrad, couldn't stay away from such a lucrative, but his attempt to get involved in the distribution of profits caused a wave of attempts on his life in 1984. The ogre miraculously managed to survive after an attack that left him with serious wounds to the neck and face. But his luck ran out the following May, when a hitman waiting for him, the VTA, gave him no chance of survival, firing 2 bullets directly into his head at this crucial moment. The keeper, who was supposed to be keeping him safe for unknown reasons, disappeared, leaving his boss without protection. Surrounding the rich architect of most of the group's financial operations escalated when he was forced to flee from the U.S. to face criminal prosecution. But his past caught up with him in Poland, where he was extradited back to the United States in the 1990s. An interesting moment in Botin's life was again covered by the American media when it was revealed that in 1984 he purchased 5 apartments in the famous Trump Tower skyscraper for the sum of $6 million. To the tune of $6 million, which at the time was an incredible amount of money. The deal was personally brokered by future President Donald Trump. The purchase expensive real estate was often a way for the Russian mafia, as a way to legalize after the wealthy, declare the authorities wanted Rev's assets in Trump. Tao emphasizing the seriousness of their intentions to crack down on criminal. You ask me who's here. The Georgian and Yaponchik, Marat Balagula, known in criminal circles as a Georgian. In criminal circles as a Georgian has taken on the role as the head of the Russian mafia in the United States. After Yusei's death, Agranizer Shi criminal operations, including an extremely lucrative scheme to evade taxes on fuel. Fuel when Vladimir Reznikov, another powerful Brighton Beach gangster, challenged Baegu to demand a huge sum of money and a stake in the business. The turning point was an incident at a nightclub, in an Odessa nightclub, where Reznikov threatened Lug. With a gun ended with a sudden heart, the latter's sudden heart attack and the subsequent Reznikov's murder on the orders Balagula's Italian partners. However, Balagula was not able to enjoy for long his status as kingpin of the Russian mafia. He became embroiled in a credit card scam. That brought him to the attention of the American authorities. To avoid arrest, he fled to South Africa and then to Sierra Leone, where he became involved in the diamond trade. 1989, he was arrested in Germany and extradited to the United States, where he was convicted on several charges. When he was released in 2004, he discovered that the Russian mafia world had changed dramatically, in parallel with the Balagula in the early 90s in the United States. Vyacheslav Ivankov, better known as Yaponchik, arrived in the United States. Quickly rose to prominence in the Russian mafia, engaging in a variety of criminal activities, including the oil business and the mining business, jewelry, and possibly drugs. In a move that contradicted his principles, his stay in the U.S. was short-lived after the FBI received information from the president of an investment firm of extortion. Ivankov was arrested. His charges included extortion and entering into a sham marriage. After serving his sentence in 1997, Ivankov was deported to Russia, ending his American mafia without kings where, for the past 2 decades on the eastern seaboard of the United States, there were several groups operating on the east coast of the United States that U.S. authorities have labeled the Russian Mafia, among them the so-called Brighton Beach Sea Brigade, led by one Zinovy Bari, an immigrant from the Soviet Union, starting with simple mailbox check thefts. The gang eventually moved on to more serious crimes, including racketeering, ecstasy trafficking, extortion, and other crimes against fellow entrepreneurs who established the gang's methods in New York City were brutal. In March 2003, Bori's handmaidens attacked Cyberplace Internet Cafe, where they brutally knocked down one of the employees, mistaking him for the owner who refused to pay tribute. This attack, captured on CCTV, has become the reason for U.S. law enforcement agencies to increase pressure on the criminal. The group, resulting in the filing criminal cases against 8 members, including Barry himself. To this day, Brighton Beach is still considered a crime-ridden neighborhood with a high-incidence car thefts. Well, let me tell you what happened. Barry wasn't the only one who came to the attention of the authorities after his time in prison. Alexei Blossom, known as Dumpling, has returned back to crime by running in Brooklyn. The 2016 indictment included 26 counts, indicating multiple crimes ranging from gambling to drug trafficking, most notably a case involving the arson of a competitor's building of a competitor that nearly resulted in loss of life. In the end, Tsvetkov was sentenced to 16.5 years in prison, and his co-conspirator, Leonid Gershman, received similar thief behind bars. But it only got worse from there. The arrest of Rodin Shulai, aka Born Piotrowski, turned out to be a significant blow to the activities of the Russian Mafia on the east coast of the United States. Prosecutors described him as a key in the region's criminal underworld, with Shula charges emphasizing his role in organizing and directing of a wide range of criminal activity. Interestingly, before he moved to the United States, little was known about Shulai's life was little known. Criminal career began in St. Petersburg, where he was associated with one of the most notorious thieves in the law, Zachariah Kalash, better known as Shakro the Young, having earned the title of Thief-in-Law. 1048, in Cyprus in 2013, Shulai soon moved to the United States, where he organized a criminal gang of more than 30, mostly Georgians and Russians. You know who I am? Not me. Thief. One of the most prominent of the Shulai group's activities has been fraud in the gambling industry. Gambling business, including the successful hacking casino slot machines, which allowed gang members to significantly increase his chances of winning. Although Shulaja was not known for direct involvement in the murders, his methods did not preclude the use of violence to achieve his goals. One of the episodes tried in court involved an attack on a billiard room that was occupied where members of a rival Armenian Shulai personally participated in this attack, demonstrating his willingness to brutality not only against rivals, but also against his subordinates. Among the muscle of the group was former boxing champion Avtandil Hurd, nicknamed Suicide for his fighting skills. One of the group's most unusual crimes was the theft about 5 tons of chocolate, which underscores the diversity of their criminal interests. The court sentenced Shulai to 45 years in prison and ordered him to pay over $2 million in fines, which was a significant blow to the activities of the Russian group. Bride Syndicate. I'd like to tell you separately about the Bride Syndicate, a cunning plan of an organized crime syndicate which attracted Russian women as participants in a fake marriage fraud, was uncovered through the investigation into the death of one of the girls. The scheme was surprisingly simple. Tempted by the promise of easy money, traveled to the US disguised as brides, entered into fake marriages, and then insured their lives for large sums of money. Returning to Russia, they falsified their deaths, usually through faked car accidents, so that the fiancés could get the insurance payout. Fraud not only enriched the companies while remaining virtually invisible thanks to well-organized document forgery, and to make the whole process appear legitimate. The girls who die in quotation marks in their homeland were actually starting a new life in other regions of Russia under new names and with new documents. The whole plan began to unravel when the left investigating the case of one of the dead brides questioned her relatives and acquaintances, led them to the discovery of an international crime syndicate involving a Caucasian organized crime group that was organizing the investigation. Also uncovered the graves in which the dead girls were supposedly buried. Of the dead girls, however, exhumation revealed that the coffins contained completely different bodies, which confirmed of the slave trade scheme. The situation with one of the scheme, known as Pronina, is particularly dramatic in her murder in Moscow, caused by a violation of previous agreements with another criminal, was a testament just how dangerous and unpredictable can be a complex and large-scale American-style divorce and blackmail in Finland. Investigation by investigators has uncovered the depth and breadth of a criminal network stretching across 3 countries: Russia, Armenia, and the United States. America. It turns out that the fraudulent, fictitious bride's life insurance policies is just the tip of an iceberg of criminal activity rooted in much broader of criminal activity, rooted rooted in much broader areas of criminality. The scheme involved car insurance fraud. The criminals used so-called ghost cars assembled from parts from different cars to simulate involvement in accidents. These cars were prepared to create lookalikes of real cars with fake documents, which allowed the thieves to claim insurance money for cars allegedly wrecked in accidents. The expert examination showed that in reality, the cars involved in the accident were assembled parts and had nothing in common with the actual insured vehicles. In addition, the criminals developed a technique to legalize income in Russia and avoid tax payments to the United States related to the restaurant business. In the US, related to the restaurant business, the women entered into sham marriages with members of the criminal group, then divorce in Russia through the courts, then officially divorced in Russia through the courts, business, and moved to the US. They would sue their ex-husbands again, sue the ex-husband again, this time to claim a share of the profits from the business as alimony. This process allowed them to cash out substantial sums of money under the guise of court payments. But it began collapsed when one of the participants in the scheme refused to share with the criminals. With the proceeds of a successful divorce from a poor American businessman and transferring the profits to her, she fled to Finland in an attempt blackmailing her former associates and demanding an increase in her share of the profits. Her demands were met with an assassination attempt by a hired assassin who had been hired to kill her. However, it was unsuccessful. Exchange of information between the Finnish and Russian police led to the arrest of 3 key members of a Caucasian organized crime group in Moscow. However, these individuals never lived to see trial. One of them died of tuberculosis, and the other two were killed in the pre-trial detention center in the course of a provoked brawl. But what happens to the Russian Mafia today? The Russian Mafia is now operating under a cloak of secrecy, trying to avoid the attention of the public and the authorities, while their leaders and clan members outwardly behave like law-abiding international organized crime specialist Dr. Federico Verisa of Oxford University. Oxford University emphasizes that Russian mafia groups are now operate autonomously while sharing a shared treasury run by a council of one man. These meetings often take place in various parts of the world. James Finke, author of the book Russian Mafia in America, notes that these structures are not like traditional mafia families like the Cosa Nostra. The Russian Mafia is organized more like as a network of people from all walks of life, which makes it particularly effective and difficult too. The members of the Russian Mafia are known for their discipline and preferring to use financial manipulation rather than overt violence, which making it even more difficult for law enforcement agencies to identify and disrupt there. In the US, Hispanics and Latinos are considered to be in the United States are Hispanic and African American gangs, such as MS-13, that have tens of thousands of members and are willing to engage in open violence even against police. However, Russian mafia gangs, as well as Italian mobs, have proven themselves to be talented organizers capable of taking control over lucrative areas of business, which is not only associated with financial losses to the economy, but also the spread of corruption within the country. Paradoxically, according to the press, the former head of the Russian Mafia in the United States, 70-year-old Boris Mayfeld, who was a security guard aggranizer. He asked to return to his homeland despite having no regrets about his criminal. As you can understand, the Russians conclusion have gone underground and are more involved financial schemes to avoid dumb crimes. That's all for now. Subscribe to my channel and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.